Yeah, hi. This might sound fairly trivial, almost peripheral to the main thrust of your talk, but it's an issue that certainly we found divisive, and I'd like your thoughts on the topic. Transgender people performing in sports, such as men becoming women, becoming powerlifters or boxers. Could you sort of say how we should argue that? I mean, we're obviously very supportive generally, but I would just like to know the basis of my argument, because I do flounder on that one.
Well, let me start by saying there's some very good news last week. In the state wrestling championships in the United States, a girl beat all the boys. In wrestling, which is a power and strength sport, a girl won the state championship. So I think we have to get away from this idea about male and female divisions. I mean, obviously there does need to be some differentiation, but I think the idea that no woman can ever achieve in mixed sport is clearly nonsense. I look at football today, going back to your question. I oppose the FA's ban on women playing in the major leagues. That is sexist discrimination. If there is a woman who has the talent, capacity and skill to get into a team, she should be able to play for Manchester United or Leeds or whatever on the same basis as men. But having said that, the trans issue is a bit different. There certainly is some evidence that trans women who have elevated of testosterone levels will have added strength and endurance. That is true. The precise degree or level of testosterone that gives them an unfair advantage, that's a matter of considerable dispute. And I think we need more research, but I certainly think it would be unfair for someone to have an inbuilt advantage. But that doesn't mean to say that all trans people do. There may be some who do, but I think in many cases they don't. And then the second thing I'd ask is, why are we focused on the potential advantage of trans women? Why aren't we talking about the advantages of athletes with fast twitch muscle fibers? That gives them an advantage in sprinting. Why aren't we talking about the advantages that athletes who have enlarged hearts and lungs have? They have a greater pumping power for blood, they have greater oxygen capacity in their lungs. That gives them an advantage. Exceptionally tall, long-legged athletes have an advantage in long jump or high jump. So I think focusing on the trans issue, that's just one element of a number of things we need to consider. Do people have unfair advantage? Certainly I think that there does need to be a broadly level playing field, but exactly where to draw the line gets really, really difficult. And, I think, Caster Semenya, the South African runner, she's being forced to take testosterone-reducing drugs, again, on the basis that it's not entirely clear how much an advantage she actually has because she has elevated levels. So it's a complex issue, and I wouldn't want any non-trans woman to be disadvantaged, but neither would I want a trans woman necessarily to be penalised, unless there's evidence.
Thank you, Peter.
Perhaps can I just say on this wider issue, since we raised the issue of trans rights and so on, I mean, I share the concerns of many feminists that they are worried about the potential implications of self-declaration and trans rights. They fear it's going to threaten non-trans women. I can understand that. It's perfectly right to have that concern, but it has to be evidence-based. And, the fact is, for example, people often say, well, a trans woman in a female prison is totally inappropriate because that will make the other women prisoners vulnerable to sexual assault or violence. But the vast majority of sexual assaults and violence against women prisoners in jails is by non-trans women. And it plays into this demonized narrative that trans women are a threat. Now, there may be one or two bad trans women who do bad things. But you shouldn't damn the whole trans community just on the basis of that. We wouldn't damn all Jews or Muslims because a particular handful in those communities do bad things. We make a distinction between Islamist terrorists and the Muslim community. We don't blame the whole Muslim community. We don't target them. We don't demonize them. We don't say they're all a potential terrorist threat. And so having this sort of approach to trans people, I think, is really, really bad and sad, because it's exactly what LGBT plus people, what we faced, gay and bisexual men, lesbian women, bisexual people. We faced this demonization, that we were a threat to children, that, all these bad, bad things that were said about us. And so to turn around and say that to others, I think because they're trans, I think is really wrong. The year before last, I was at an event where there were quite a number of women's rights organizations, and I went around and spoke to them and asked them if they had a trans-inclusive policy. These were women's centres, rape crisis centres, and so on. And they all said they had, and some of them had trans policy for 5 or 6 years. And I said, was this agreed by your management board? They all said yes. Was it agreed by the clients, the women who come there? And they said yes. Have you ever had any problems of a woman feeling uncomfortable or some bad thing being done by a trans woman? Everybody said no. Now, I'm sure there probably will be somewhere in the country where a trans woman has done something wrong. But that's their culpability. It's not the culpability of all trans people. So we have to make that really important distinction. And I think it's so important that trans and non-trans women stand together against rape, domestic violence, and male privilege. We have to, all those women and their their male allies, we need to stand together to fight the real enemy, which is not trans women or trans men. It's those sections of the male population that perpetrate crimes against women.